school. Under Spore Leaders' leadership, Lincoln built its framework around caring adult relationships with specific strategies on how to work with students who live with toxic stress, from poverty, substance abuse, physical abuse, and neglect. During the first year of implementation of its trauma-informed approach, Lincoln experienced an 85% reduction in out-of-school suspension days. After 3 decades as a teacher and leader, Spore Leader now works as a consultant. Director Jamie Redford filmed a documentary on Lincoln High School called Paper Tigers during the 2012-2013 school year. This was released recently at the Seattle International Film Festival. This documentary will be screened during an afternoon breakout session, and Jim will be on hand to answer questions about the film and his experiences. Please join me in welcoming Jim Spore Leader.
I've walked in your shoes. I know the pressure that keeps coming down, and so I admire the job that you do and the coaches that you set to help kids. I just screened about 4 months ago in our community, Walla Walla. They liked the name so well they named it twice, but I did a documentary or community event for Rich Hill, and I'm telling you, it took me 3 days to recover from that powerful documentary of kids living in poverty. Need to get my there we go. You know, I don't get a lot of opportunities to talk to a lot of groups and be able to stay connected. My travel keeps me moving. But if we could capture the hearts of many of you that are here that would be willing to look at making a new approach to school discipline, you'll get everything that the mandates are asking from us. You'll get higher attendance, higher GPA, higher graduation rates, lower discipline, better attendance. And this model will do that for you. So we need a new approach. As you're aware of the studies that are going around, but traditional discipline no longer works. Now we can think it works, but if you look at the research, we're not the same societal makeup that we were in the past. We don't have a lot of 2-parent families. We have a lot of children without supervision. And so I really think we need to come to grips with that. And I say that because I was very traditional in my disciplinary approach. And so when I made my paradigm shift, which I'll get into it with you, but we really need to look at how we're disciplining kids. Because if we're going to do it, it's going to be you and I. They're going to be out there being the change makers. Also, I'd like to just preface that going with a trauma-informed model is not adding onto your plate. It's not adding a curriculum, because there is no curriculum. It's how we approach our kids and families. I'm terrible with names. Just share with me her homeschool program of going out and doing the home visits. That's so powerful. And that's what we had at Lincoln. We had an intervention specialist, and I loved what she said. She goes, my relationships began on their porch. And so they play an important role. You know, I had all the zero tolerance policies hung up all around my middle school when I was there, and all the anti-language, I had it down very well. But when we look at zero tolerance policies over the last 20 years, there is nothing, there's no research, there's nothing that tells us they're making our schools a safer place. But what they have done is they've taken suspensions to a whole different level. I was on the west side of our state and talking to a group. It was one of those groups I didn't know I was going into a lion's den until I got there. But our excessive discipline policies are hurting our kids, and they're taking away from what you want from your kids, the success that you're looking for your kids. And that's what we want to keep in place. And we know if we start suspending kids, the younger we start suspending them, it's a slippery slope to pipeline to prison. And what I love about the trauma model, it is a model that treats everybody the same. There's no racial barrier. There's no economic barrier. Everybody gets treated the same, with dignity and respect. And when kids know that they have that trust in you as an adult, you can walk them miles and have that influence. I love this slide. I don't like the results of it, but it really kind of symbolizes what we do with discipline. I had a hammer. So they come into our office, so what do? We hit them with our hammer of traditional consequences and discipline. And if they return to our office, we hit them harder because they really need to get this. And so when that hammer is in our hand and that kid's a nail, we keep pounding it and pounding it and pounding it until we have a bent up nail that's not usable. What happens? We yank the nail out and we toss it. And that's where we're losing kids out of the system through dropout. Just going to cover quickly on the ACE study. If you look at the bottom, this is the longest longitudinal study in America, still going on today. Follows them all the way through death, 17,300 people. But if you just look at the pyramid alone, when they first came out with a pyramid, they would have circles that would go up and say, well, we think so, but we're not sure. Well, you don't see that now. If we've got kids building those adverse childhood experiences and we keep stacking on them, then it starts to get into their neurodevelopment. And that's where the risky behaviors start. And up to 6 ACEs takes 20 years off your life expectancy. My last year at Lincoln, our kids were at 5.5 average. So if I told you that and said, there it is, you can leave now, I've been giving you a story of hopelessness. But the research also gives us a pathway of hope, and that's through the change of our approach. Dr. Anda calls it the #1 chronic epidemic in the United States. And he says with the material and the research we have right now, you have to consciously deny the research, not to do anything. Well, in my state, our legislators are consciously not doing anything with the research. But look at the date, 2010 is when he said that in front of Congress at a Senate hearing, and we're still talking about it. By a show of hands, how many got to pick the family they were born into? I'm a preacher's kid. I didn't get to predict that. Well, if you look at the norms that we're using to evaluate our kids, we're still in that middle class norm, cause and effect. You do this is going to happen. This happens, you're going to be suspended. If we stay, we cannot, this is the traditional model that we have to come and look at and see where the changes need to be made, because we don't know what's behind the scene. We don't know what's behind the discipline. There's a story behind every discipline. And our kids are actually coming into schools with families like this. But we look at their behavior, and we don't always look for the story. Now, this would be wonderful if it was possible to have a common belief for all of our kids to be successful in our schools, to attend school daily. My intervention specialist, if you were in school, she would not knock on your door and van's out front, you're going to school, let's go. Now, they weren't always happy about that, but it was a way of saying, we care so much about you. If I got to come out to your door to pick you up and get you in school, I'm going to do it. So expect me here. Every time you miss school, I'm going to be out here, because your success lies on you being in school, getting your education, and being a part of the Lincoln family. So we want our kids focused on the academics. We want them motivated and engaged. We want them to behave appropriately, hand in their homework, and do well in every one of their classes. When we all want that, I mean, that's something that I think we would all want to strive for. But the reality is that this is state of Washington figures, yours could be higher or a little bit lower, but what happens is 50% of the kids coming into our classrooms have our trauma impacted. 50%. That's why we're seeing all these blowouts in our classrooms with disruptive behavior, and I'll get into that. This young man, we would probably reprimand and have him sent to the office immediately for non-compliance because his head's down, whereas there could have been a drug raid at his home in the middle of the night, or he got kicked out of the house and he was couch surfing. You know, we need to find those stories out. So as a traditionalist principal, I always feel like I've been a student relationship person, and I was at the middle school for 22 years. So I knew my community. I got to go through a generation of kids. But then when I went to Lincoln, it was the most out of control environment I'd ever seen. I mean, my jaw was stuck in my chest when I went over just for a 2-day visit, where they had removed the principal and put a brand new internship in. It's called PAIN. The school is called PAIN. Send your kids to PAIN. Your most hurting, struggling kids, send them to PAIN. Or that's those PAIN kids. So that reputation was there. And so when I felt it was safe enough that I could leave the school, which was the 3rd year, I went to Terry Barilla, our community coordinator on ACES, invited me to Spokane, and I heard John Medina as a keynote. I can't pronounce his exact title, but he's world known in the brain sciences. But I had never heard about toxic stress before until Dr. Medina introduced it. I didn't know that if you're heavily under toxic stress, that releases a chemical in your brain called cortisol that impairs your ability to learn, and it impairs your ability to problem solve. I'd never heard about that. Fight, flight, freeze. I'd hear it a little bit, connected to something else. But when Dr. Medina came up and shared that and started going through this range, and then said it's physiologically impossible for these kids to take in new knowledge when their brains are in the fight, flight, freeze mode. And in our traditional value, if a kid comes in, or we're interacting with a student or even a parent, it's usually we're leading the discussion and we're leading it to where we want it to go. I just had communication with a principal from Wisconsin that I've been working with, who we got to work on some things, because it's like you will have a consequence. I mean, big bull, everything's about rewards and consequences, where again, coming back to a trauma-informed approach, I always say the trauma-informed is the umbrella that makes everything else that you do better. As educators, we never say kids can't, but there are kids that can't physiologically function when they're in that level. And we never say it's out of control. It's always the student's choice to act the way they do. My God, we've got fifth graders coming in our buildings, and some of our teachers are saying, he did it to me. And I'm thinking, at 5 years old, he got up in the morning, barely got himself dressed, and said, I'm gonna get Mrs. Smith today. That's my plan. But we are treating kids as such, that they are doing it to us, and then we're doing it back with the hammer, and it doesn't go a long ways. I wanted to show you. I want to show you this slide with the little girl underneath the table. I've been in 4 different schools in which the office has been called to come down and get this defiant child out from underneath the table. And when we were able to get, these were first and second graders. When we were able, strangers, Brooke, who you'll see in the movie today, incredible intervention specialist. She got on the floor with these kids. Never met her, making sure they were feeling safe, and she was able to get them out from the table. And they would go down to the intervention office, their specialist's office, and talk about it. Every single kid, 100%. I know it's only 4, 100%. When they were asked, why were you under the table? They said, because I'm stupid. So we're making these judgments sometimes when these kids come in, and we're not seeking the story behind the behavior. Because when they were told to do it at their desk, and learning, and if I'm not feeling safe in my learning because I'm stupid, and you keep forcing me to do something that's making me look stupid in my eyes, then I flight. And that's why so many kids are under the table. And then we reinforce their feelings about themselves when we get them out of here. And we reinforce it when they return to our class, that we look at them and go, oh my God, the principal's sitting you back. And just shake our heads. These kids know body language like nobody else. They have to, if they're going to survive their home environment, they have to have a survival brain, because they don't know if dad's a happy drunk or if he's a mean drunk. They need to know when it's time to flight for their safety. And that's something that was very shocking. We had one school that we went into that we're doing expansion work. Little boy, actually, the teacher had one arm, one leg, walked him down a long hallway, came into the intervention specialist room and said, you can have him. What's wrong? I don't know. He's just throwing a fit. He wants to call his mom, so he's trying to be manipulative. This little guy was asking to call mom because dad is in prison for breaking his face with a baseball bat and watching his mom getting beat with a bat. Why wouldn't we let a student just call home and say, Mom, are you okay? And take that stress off that child's brain, so then now he can put that towards learning versus that going around, is mom okay? Is mom okay? Is mom okay? And that's what interrupts the thinking. The window of tolerance is one of the most powerful graphics for me. When you look at the healthy family and those two beautiful granddaughters of mine, you look at the healthy family, they're prepared. They can walk into the schools. They're already have been reading. They know their colors. They stay in between the lines. I still can't. But if you look at the bottom baseline of tolerance, the red's not showing up, but they have all that area to work in before they hit their breaking point. And again, that's the children that we're having them lay out the standards. We want kids to be like that. They can figure the cause and effect. They'll go for the reward. And they know that they got to work towards the reward, and they'll do what they have to do to get the reward. But when we look at the trauma impact brain, they have a very low tolerance before they hit their breaking point. And when they hit that breaking point is when you get that explosion. Now, Jonelle, we give you permission to show this. When she first transferred to Lincoln, one of our practices is that we were out meeting kids at the steps as they were coming on campus and watching them, because kids could come by and you could tell they were really upset, and then we'd make a mental note and follow up on it later in the morning. But Jonelle, when she first came in, she'd come up the stairs, good morning, let's get about it. Good morning, Jonelle. You better tell Sheila to shut her mouth up or I'm going to put my fist in it. We had to bring her down on that one, have a little talk about it. But the anger coming out of this gal every day, we could have suspended her every day just by what she said coming up the stairs. But we kept bringing her in. What's up? What's wrong? What's causing your anger? And for Jonelle, we're able to take her baseline tolerance because of what she learned, and now she has a much greater gap. We can't always take them down to where those healthier kids that come in, but we sure as heck can bring our high-risk students' window of tolerance down so that they have more room to work in. And Donnell, I bought her a longboard because she would longboard around town till 10 or so until she knew her parents would be passed out drunk, and then she would feel safe to go into the house. So I'll go over this with you. This is the belief of the children that are coming in, and everything I'm sharing with you is evidence-based research. I don't know where we got off that track to all of a sudden we're taking on all these mandates that have no research behind it. So what I'm sharing with you today is all backed by research. But these kids that come in that are isolated, they isolate because they're not feeling lovable. Search out, especially as administrators, I feel like we have to be very visible. And I always found that, whether I was at my middle school or when I went to Lincoln, if you're out there greeting kids, you're building relationships. I think you got to be out there at every lunch. I know it's hard because when you're at lunch, stuff starts stacking. But that's the relationship time to move. Look for the isolated kids. Just acknowledge that they're there. Good morning. It's good to have you. You probably won't get a reaction. But over time, they become your shadow, and then you wish they would isolate a little bit. When they are emotionally neglected, then they feel like they're worthless. And I'm a high school guy, but I'm working in a lot of elementaries. I don't claim to be an expert in any way, but these little guys coming into elementary are able to articulate themselves pretty darn well. And the emotional neglect and that sense of worthlessness, that I'm stupid, abandonment. On this one here, we didn't graduate Dylan. Dylan got on meth, and we did everything we could to get him back. We weren't able to. Dylan got off of meth outside of Lincoln. He's got his support in place. We helped him with employment. He's working with the Walla Walla School District as a sub, hoping to get on with their custodial staff. And if you talk to him, even though he felt loved when he was a student, he felt very ashamed that he allowed himself to go into that kind of an addiction, but he made it back. And who do you want to know that he made it back? His teachers. He made a special trip to say, I'm off meth. And then when we look at academic performance, this is a hot button for me. I don't think you can be working any harder than you're working. I think our teachers are under tremendous stress. I see it all the time. When I go out to the principals to see them, we don't always get to the trauma because I feel like I'm a therapist. I just have to listen. And tears are coming down. I know the mandates are very stressful. But the kid that comes into our academic environment, they're coming in with that fight because every kid impacted by trauma, it's a safety issue. And they will fight you on it if they don't feel safe with it. Looks like defiance, but it's a safety issue. Simply by having a person sit down and say, this looks hard for you. Do you mind if I help you with this? Or if you had a paraeducator, or to let that child know, hey, it's safe. We're gonna do this together. We're gonna make it. Our kids will avoid shame at any cost because they will not be embarrassed in front of their peers. The defiance part under the table comes from survival. And then consequences. You can give them consequences. You do. I did. I could tell you which kid was leading the building at 21 referrals when I was tracking that. But they'll accept the consequences if they're being shamed in front of their peers. And lastly, they feel labeled. And that's where I would hear that at the high school, where they were kicked out from the traditional and sent to the alternative, is that I don't belong in school. People think I'm dumb. I got kicked out. And I said, well, we would meet as a team with our new kids coming in and say, we guarantee you here, you're going to be valued and cared for. This young man, brilliant. You could pick his college. Lost him to meth. I'm sure a lot of your communities are like, well, we've been hit with meth and heroin very hard. And he gets out of jail and he comes by and wants to talk to me and he says, can you give me another chance? And I said, heck yeah, your family. He goes, well, I'm going to beat it this time. It's going to be easy. I said, well, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of work and you're going to have to really stay connected with your support. He never even made it after that meeting to his brother's house. He was back at the meth house. Off meth, and he graduated this last June. Came back and got his diploma. When I talk about fear, this young man was the kid that would greet me in the morning. He would ask me how I'm doing before I could ask him how he was doing. And at every lunch, he would come by and say, "So how's your day going?" Incredibly young man. All kinds of talent. Struggles in math. He came by one day, slipped his head in the office and said, "Can I talk to you?" I said, "Sure, come in." And before I shut the door, I knew in my head that he was coming in because both of his parents had fallen back into addiction. He was eating out. He was eating out of canned vegetables. The house was a mess. So I shut the door and I turn around and his tears streaming. I said, "Brian, what's up?" And I'm expecting to hear about his parents. And he said, "Spoiler, I am such a dumbass." I said, "What?" Because I'm a dumbass. I said, "Brian, why are you calling yourself that?" He said, "Well, in the math class I'm in, the teacher puts out every step to working through a fraction. It's right there, and I don't get it." That particular teacher was one of the ones that I had to work with, would write him up because he was refusing to do his work. Never took the time to say, "Brian, what's up? What can we do to make you feel safe? What can we do to help you with your math so that you will feel comfortable and quit skipping math?" You know, when we look at the cycle of how these kids go through our system, the first thing we look at, what happens is that the attendance starts to fall off. Unless we have home visitors and really go after that, then we're losing kids. And if they have but poor attendance, then they're struggling academically because they're not there to learn. Then they become disengaged. And then what do we see? We start seeing that disruptive behavior. And then the student has a loss of hope. They cannot connect 2 weeks down. They're trying to connect on a daily basis. Where am I going to sleep tonight? All kinds of things that are rolling in their heads. And then they drop out on us. I had one student that started Lincoln 18 years old with 3 credits. So we sat down. I said, "Jerry, you're not going to want to go to school until you're 25, do you?" Said, "Hell no." I said, let's see if we can if you'll trust us, we'll get you through the GED process." That's when GED counted for something. And he gave us a shot, but after 4 weeks, he came out of my office and said, "I didn't just want to walk out the door. I wanted to stop by and say, I can tell the teachers here really care about kids." He goes, "I've never experienced that. And I want you to know that I've experienced it in your school. And I want to thank you for trying to help me out, but I'm dropping out of school." And I said, "Oh, you can't drop out. Trust us." He said, "Spoiler, I do trust you. I do trust the teachers. I don't know where I'm staying tonight. I don't know where I'm going to get a meal tonight. And that's all I can think of when I'm at school." I'm not a high stakes test fan because of all these mandates that are coming down. And the ones that are getting killed are trauma kids. And the kids whose brains have been hardwired differently. We're putting them all on the same measurement scale. And it reminds me of this cartoon. You know, we want to be fair, so go climb the tree. That's how our assessments sometimes are coming across, at least in my state they are. So if you look at Maslow over 60 years ago, if you even look at Maslow's chart, you have to go up the steps to get the academic learning. If you're hungry, if you're in an unsafe environment, you cannot get the learning unless you hit those steps. And yet we're being judged, you're being judged on the learning. We've had lots of good social and emotional programs in our buildings that we've had to toss them because we've got to get the academic learning. We're being judged, we're being graded. But Maslow even shows us if we are not meeting those basic needs, you cannot get the academic learning. And when you're working your tail end off, and you get just a small increase, it comes with a huge, heavy cost of labor on your end and on your teacher's end, and pressure because somebody's judging you. But if we look at this, again, we can get what it is that we want if we change our approach. So Lincoln High School, I was at the middle school for 22 years and had a gentleman come by and see me, and I thought it was a salesman. So I told my secretary, get him out of my office 10 minutes max. Well, it was a consultant that the district had hired to assess all of our district alternative programs. I didn't know they were doing it, and there was no reason for him to come to my school even to share it. So I can't explain that, but I read the report. And he put a voice to every one of the people that he interviewed. And he put a voice to the Lincoln kids, he put a voice to the community. As a school of wasted tax dollars, all they're doing is babysitting over there. Who would want to put money in that building for those kids? We don't feel safe here, teachers, staff. Why can't we have a cook? They got a bat sack lunch every day, same thing, hamburger, dried up whole hamburger. All the bottom windows were barred, looked like a dang juvenile facility, lockup facility. So to make a culture, and especially going into one that's out of control, and trying to get control of it because the history was F you. If I showed up to class and I put my feet on the desk, I'm told to take them down, F you. You can't leave the class, F you. You need to take your headphones off, F you. With that, you can tell I didn't have a very good welcoming committee when I went over because it was so bad when I went over for the 2-day visit that I actually asked to be transferred immediately because I only had a short time, I felt, to try to get some things turned around. And when I walked into that building, I'm a high five guy and a fist bump guy, and I was high fiving myself. And I was fist bumping myself, and I was having conversations by myself because I went in and sat next to the kids. They would act as if I wasn't there. And if I said good morning, I wouldn't get a response back. So I had to deal with a lot of rejection. And I was the guy in their eyes that was going to come in and make Payne at the time to look like the traditional high school. Where they'd been hurt. So when I went over there, I knew we had to change the name. I've lived in the community for over 30 years. The kids chose the new name. That helped us with the new culture. And that helped us to bring the kids in. I call it student meetings. I couldn't call it assemblies because we weren't capable of an assembly because of our behavior. But at these meetings is where we would talk. And thank God for Dan and his interviews, because he saved my bacon so many times when they wanted to complain about something. I would just simply say, I'm your advocate. We got the cook by the end of the year. We had a co-ed soccer team. We got 2 matches in. They had their first prom. A Xeroxed handbook that you thought you gave a brick of gold. So with the culture changes that started, and I was still in my traditional mold, I had to deal with the F-offs. But after John Medina, I mean, he hit me like a lightning bolt. But our paradigm shift came that we did need a new approach. I was always told, you put them out, they're going to have a free day. And my response was that I'm not their parent. I can't tell you what kind of day they're going to have, but the kids in the building are going to see that's unacceptable behavior. And I used to give the life lessons about if you say this to your boss, you're going to get fired. You can't use that language here at school. So I thought I gave them great life lessons. But with this new approach, what we found out is that the barriers that were in these young people's lives became stepping stones. And here's the hope in this whole process, and that builds resilience. It got us reconnected with the kids I showed you that are out of school. They still are in the family. And that's the message we send. We are a family. They still check up with their teachers once they're gone. They come flying back when they left us sick, and we were sick of what was going to happen to them. They fly back to show the family that they've made changes because they're so proud of it. But the caring adult relationship changes the life path. A caring adult relationship that these kids, all kids, can change a life path. And then when you change that life path, that's when they start to find the hope. And when they get a hold of hope, get out of their way because they're moving.
I don't know.
Self-confidence.
Then he gets released.
And then we taught our kids, you got to have a village of support. You've got to put some people in your life that cover your back, be there for you. It's not the one that's going to say, let's go smoke a bowl. But you've got to keep those caring adults in your life so that you can call on them when you need them. And that's part of the culture that we were able to build in. And by the way, I'm the guy up here speaking. If I had my choice, I'd have my whole staff up here because what they did on a day-to-day basis blew me away. And so it's a team effort. It's not a one person show. So in our shift, we went from what's wrong with this student to what has this student gone through. This little gal came in as a freshman, a little bit of a poop. And then she moved out, moved to Spokane, and then we got reconnected and she drove down. My wife and I took her out to dinner and she was on track to graduate. She was in a program that she was moving so rapidly. She was going to make her graduation date. My wife and I said, we're going to be there. And she crashed. Moved back to Walla Walla. Looked up her family, her Lincoln family. She's got her own place. She went out and got her own job. And now she's ready to start looking at how we can get her connected to the community college. So all kids with trauma and ACEs, you don't always see it right away, the change. It can come later. Some of the transformation just happens right before your eyes, and they just keep going. When Jade was a freshman, I'll never forget, it was Halloween day. And as you know, if we want to get anything done, we have to work weekends or get to school very, very early. And this was one of those mornings I had gotten to school very, very early and just got settled in to get through my pile of work. And Jade is at my doorstep at 6:30 in the morning with Kylene, her best friend. Jade, cute as a bug's there. She's all dressed up like a bunny. Her friend Kylene has her costume in her arm, and then there's a little guy there. And Jay goes, "Brother, my little brother's gonna be with me today." I said, "Well, Jay, that can't happen. It's a liability issue. I'd do it if I could, but he can't." She goes, "Brother, he's staying with me."
That's Saturday and Sunday.
I said, "Jay,
Like, I can do
I'd
that.
love to make that
For
happen."
real, I want them to work me.
He goes, "Can we sit down and talk?" So they come in, and she looks at me and says, "There might be a dead man in our apartment." So what?
2 days.
Well, the person they're staying, that she was staying with, got high on meth and told them all to get out, and he started barricading the doors and the windows, and he was gonna have it out with the police. Then while she's sharing this with me, her phone rings, and then she kind of gets into it with her mom and puts the phone down and says, "Yeah, she's on the run. There's a warrant out for her." She's the one that my secretary came in livid because Jade hit the wrong button for the pictures that she wanted printed. And it came into the office, all color, almost a half a ream, third of a ream of paper. My secretary was just so upset about that. So I called Jade in. I said, "Jade, we can't use our printers for photographs."
No, but I want this nigga
And
to-
tears started coming down her face, and she says, "Spoiler." I thought they were gang at first because they were so tatted up, but then I saw this nice woman in the middle, and I got a little confused at some of the pictures. But she says, "That's the first time my mom's had all of her kids. My grandmother has had all of her kids together. Nobody's in prison."
Number, I can't just text him.
So I let my secretary cool off, and then I gave her all her pictures back. So with our kids, when we have them in our office, we've got the healing starts with them, and the relationship starts when they know that their voice has been heard. We don't have to validate the action, validate the voice. Ask them the questions rather than being the giver. I want to tell you what's going to happen. When students are allowed to express their feelings, that's when change begins to happen. And it's the platform for us as educators to start building those relationships. The conferences I had in the office are burned into my memory. The powerful conferences, because we talked about what was going on, but we also held them accountable. And my first student that came in that told the teacher to F off, and I had made the decision that I was going to keep the discipline inside, I was sick to my stomach. I was literally nauseous because that was a 3-day out of school suspension if you told the teacher to F off. And when the kid comes in, all I said was, "Jared, what's going on? Doesn't sound like you." And that's all I said. I didn't give him my lecture, we have fire and all that. Just said, "What's going on? Doesn't sound like you." And he just broke down and said, "My dad's a drunk," spoiler, He's failed me my entire life, and I am so pissed off. I'll have to validate what he said to the teacher, but I can sure validate that must really hurt. It makes me feel bad. I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm out of here.
And he goes, he's let me down on everything. But today I'm 16 and he promised me a car, and there's no car. I am so pissed. He set me up again. Normally I don't let him set me up, but I thought he was going to come through, and he didn't. And as Jared's talking to me, his level is, even though he's pissed, is coming down. And I'm just sitting at the table listening and validating the voice. And he says, "Thank you, Sproy, for listening." You're welcome. And this is what happens so often, more than not, is the first thing he says, "That teacher didn't deserve that. I need to apologize." And I said, that would be very noble, but I never make kids apologize. I want it to come from the heart. He goes, I need to apologize. Then I brought up the consequence. I'm not going to keep you out of school, Jared. We're going to do the discipline in school. He was fine. It was okay. He knew what he did was wrong. And when he went out after school, he went out to talk to the teacher with the apology. And the teacher comes in and says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe the apology that Jared gave me." And he shared with me what was going on. He goes, "Wow, he's dealing with a lot." Now, in my first year of making this transition, I have to tell you that kids weren't used to being in school suspension. They were used to being in out of school. So I had many that wanted to barter with me and say, "Don't put me in ISS, just suspend me." I said, "Well, I'm not suspending you. I'm putting you in in-school suspension." "I don't want to be in in-school suspension." "Why?" "It's boring." All right, he's taking my stomach ache away. It's reinforcing. I had kids in that year that were begging me to suspend them because they want to do lunch detention. Because when we do put them out on the street, there's no supervision. We don't know if they're in a healthy situation or not. We don't know who they're hanging with. Are they breaking into homes? But when you keep it inside and start developing that nurturing relationship, that was the only year I had kids begging me to suspend them. From then on, kids appreciated it. The one part about trauma informed is we can't get that lens and say, "Oh, it's those kids." Because if you try to assess who's trauma, who isn't, you're